it makes no difference what you refer to the Spirit as. Spirit of the universe, the Great Spirit. Our Native American friends, they knew that so well. The Spirit, the Great Spirits, they have the spirits from each direction. They have Spirit of the sun, Spirit of the moon, and just invoke whatever spirit works for you. It's something that's bigger than you, more powerful than you. You can invoke the Spirit, and then suddenly you will find that your mind quiets down. And you know what happens then? The Spirit flows through you and into the lives of others. That's why we're doing this step 11. There's a lot of brain damage still. We want the sunlight of the Spirit to flow through us and into the lives of others. And when that happens, one of the things that I have always admired in some people is their great and infinite kindness. Years ago, when I was a little old kid, I thought I wanted to be a tough hombre. Well, I didn't. I'll use quote Bob O from Denver. I'm more like Elmer Fudd. I'm not Don Juan, I'm Elmer Fudd, he said. He came out of a sex inventory, he went in as Don Juan, came out Elmer Fudd. And I tell you what, we got people like that all over in AA, and they just drop these little pearls like that, and we can pick them up, put them in our little leather pouch, and carry them along with us and use them when we need to. I'm not Don Juan, I'm Elmer Fudd, and I got to treat my wife like the great pearl that she is. Anyway, we're here as a complete and pure gift. No strings attached. There's nothing that even says that I have to do this. I don't have to do this. I really don't have to do this. I can still run and manage my life, except that I tried that. And I ended up in a place that I still refer to as a snake pit. And I refer to it as a snake pit because I absolutely abhor snakes. And I wouldn't want to be in a pit with a bunch of them. And yet that's kind of where I was. I lived with a mind that just absolutely took me to some of the most horrible places. And I lived with actions that I could not forgive myself for. And then I ended up here, and I discovered that there are no conditions. God loves me as I am, where I am, and can I be any less with the folks that I am with? Sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I understand Him. When I consciously surrender, I am saying, God, you can run my life. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm making a conscious decision. See, I did a surrender when I first got here back in 1977. I was so beaten and broken that I finally conceded to the fact that I'm an alcoholic. Well, by the time, actually it didn't take 13 years, by the time I was 6 months sober, all of a sudden I was pretty sharp, pretty quick, snappy. I had a lot of snappy lines, and people should be asking me to run groups, and they weren't, but they should have been. And I really thought how well I had done in getting sober, what I had done. Tell you how many meetings a week I went to and how many other people I worked with and blah, blah, blah. I didn't understand that it was coming to me as a gift. I took all the credit for my own sobriety. And all that has ever really worked for me is a surrender. And so when I was 13 years sober, I knew I'd made an unconscious surrender back in that treatment facility in 1977. And so when I awakened one day to the fact that I now need to make a conscious surrender, I need to know every day, what am I surrendering to? I'm surrendering to the spirit that I understand. The spirit I understand today is different than the spirit I used to know, and it'll be different tomorrow. I remember one time old Don said, and there's some in this room that can remember it, he said, you better get all you're going to get from me, because I won't be by this way again. I thought, oh, shit. What do you mean you won't be by this way again? You have to dissect. He had a tremendous IQ, and what he was saying was, I won't be by this way again. Next time I'm here, I'll be different. Next time I'm here, you all will be different. So let's give to one another whatever we can this time, because we'll all be different next time. See, that's what occurs for me each time I get up and start my day, with a conscious surrender. I can feel my mind quiet down when I do a conscious surrender. And then I'm in a position to follow the instructions of this book that says, God, guide and direct my thinking. There's so many things that old timers have given us, and we all quote our sponsors, and there's nothing in the world wrong with that. If passes on, passes on. Listen, I look out here and I see many of you who don't know me from Adam, and that's the way this deal's supposed to work. You all have been working with your sponsor, and maybe I and they were good friends, and maybe that's where they got this, and maybe they're second or third generation. Who knows? It doesn't make any difference. Bottom line is, this great way of living is being passed from one drunk to another, to another, to another. But I remember my sponsor one time, he said, he was in prison, and this thing was brought to him, this way of recovering. He was a bad alcoholic. And he said, his sponsor said to him, Don, you're going to have to surrender to a higher power. And Don said, I don't think there's anything out there. I really don't. And his sponsor looked him right in the eye and says, Don, nothing can run your life better than you can. Nothing can run your life better than you can. If you think you can run your life, look at the nifty reward that the state of Colorado has given you. Boy, that brings it home quickly, doesn't it? If you think you can run your life, look at the reward, the nifty reward the state of Colorado has given you for the job you're doing. See, I wasn't in prison, but it was the same thing. I was in a treatment facility, and I was that close. I was just an eyelash away from being sent to the nut house for the rest of my life. They thought they were going to have to lock me up, because I was a danger to myself and society. I'm a guy that likes to drive around with loaded guns in his car. I don't know why. I'm not afraid of anything. But I want to have 2 or 3 loaded pistols in the front seat with me. I love the feel of them. I'm goofy. Okay? Consciously surrender. Consciously surrender today. I can ask God to guide and direct my thinking. Anything in this great universe which causes me to think differently is better than anything that emanates from this mind of mine. If I can do nothing but having a sense of, can I be perhaps willing to let some kindness flow through me and into the lives of others? I'm a real son of a bitch, if you want to know the truth. I can do verbal surgery on you faster than you can blink your eye. And I'm grotesque in the way I do it. I pick your weakness that I know that you have. And that's what I zero in on. I'm a real stand-up fellow, aren't I? So, am I willing these days to ask something in this universe? Maybe that something is the spark of the divine that resides within all of us. See, I'm a one who doesn't get too religious in what I talk about, but I do believe the spark of the divine is in all of us. Because I've seen too many of you get well and change in ways that are you're just totally and completely different than what you were when I met you. There's something that emanates from you in the way of a light or something. Gail said it Friday night when we got here. She said, have you noticed these people? Have you noticed how much better they all look? All of the ones that we've seen from years past just look better than they did a year ago. See, and I've been watching that among you all for a long time now. And you do. I look at you and I think, is that the same person that I knew? There's a lightness about you that wasn't there before. And all it is you're just doing what we're all doing. We have found a path upon which we can embark and walk through in this experience of ours, and we can make whatever contribution we're supposed to make. I'll make my contribution. Malcolm's going to make his. Dana's going to make his. The Al-Anon ladies, I just love the Al-Anon ladies. I just absolutely love them. I mean, God damn it, I made so much fun of them for years. Well, there is some truth to that, you know. I mean, to some of the things you've heard. I'm not an alcoholic. I suffer from Al-Anon abuse. I had to get that in. I just had to do that. That's called setting them up. And they know I don't mean it. They know I don't mean it. How are we doing, Glenn? We went right on past, didn't I? And I didn't follow your instructions. I'm sure. Never mind. Never mind. You know, I've never been one to spend time other than what I've shared with you on how do you do step 11. And I know there are places in AA that some folks who believe in going off to retreats and learn how to do an effective step 11 or pray and meditate and meditation sessions and what have you. And I have no problem with that. And who knows, maybe someday I'll decide that that's what I need to do. But for now, I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that I think prayer and meditation is such an individual thing. My sponsor never told me how I should pray and meditate. Never even hinted at how I was supposed to do it. I just knew that step 11 was there, and then I was on my own. And somehow I woke up one day and I just knew that I had to do this. I knew that I had to start my day with some sort of something better than what I was doing. And that was when I discovered this simple little thing: God, guide and direct my thinking. There's nothing complicated about that. And I'm a fellow that can complicate the simplest thing. And so that sounded pretty simple to me. God, guide and direct my thinking. I still, to this day, I've been using that. I've never varied too much from that. I've tried a couple of other things just because I wanted to try them, and you can too. We can always experiment with anything. Don used to tell a story, and he'd say, you go down the road, and you come to the sign that says two-headed calf 5 miles back to the east off this little country road, and you can go to look at that two-headed calf if you want. You know that it doesn't really exist, but you can go look at it. But if you're going to go do it, take somebody with you so you can find your way back. See, I got to do that because I can get out there and get lost and never find my way home. If you want to do something, tell your sponsor, hey, I used to do that. I'd go over to his house and say, Don, here, I think here's what I'm going to do. He said, well, God, he said, that just sounds like a lot of fun. Go do it. Go for it. And as I'd be walking out the door, he'd say, have fun. Have fun? I'm dying here, and you're telling me to have fun? I finally, years later, understood, yes, have fun. Have fun. I'll tell you, have fun today. Have fun today. Have fun with all of our foibles and our goofiness. Who cares if we're goofy? I mean, we're just a little closed society among ourselves, a bunch of nuts running loose in the world. The Al-Anons came in and joined us. They kind of form a protective corridor around us. We can't get in too much trouble when they're around. You know, I will. I'll say to Gail sometime, Gail, honey, I think I'm going to go do this. And she say, oh, really? And I say, yeah, I think so. She says, why would you want to do that? Well, I don't know, but I think this. She says, we can't afford this. I'm thinking, what do you mean can't afford it? What do you mean? Well, we don't have enough money to do that. What does that have to do with anything? You got to have somebody who either tells you, let's not go down that road, or if we go down it, this is the way home. So for an old drunk, you can try anything. You really can. If you come across something, you say, I want to try this, try it. Just know that you got to make sure that you take somebody with you so you can find your way home. And I think that's applicable in all areas of our sobriety. Go try it if you want to. Go try it. But if you can't find your way home, you could get out there and be totally lost. Like I say, this is such an individual thing. I've always been careful. I don't give people say, well, you know, there's a good meditation course over here or a good prayer course over there. There are some wonderful people in the churches that are always willing to give you their time, and they'll share some of their thoughts with you. And so they're just countless possibilities. So, you know, that's up to each individual. I'm going to turn this over and see if anybody has any questions about Step 11. But before I do that, I want to make sure Malcom, whatever, whoever. I loved Malcom, and he knows that. Our life together started with a guy that showed more courage than I will ever have in his journey. God, when I first met him, he was, I think he just had a fire in his house, lost everything. And we were trying to move him out of the house, what little there was to move over into a trailer house, wasn't it, Malcom? And I don't remember what time of the year it was, but it was not January. It was just a morbid time of the year to be moving out of a house and over into a trailer house, just trying to survive a bad fire. And I never saw Malcom quit doing what we're doing one time. So I don't want to go on and get off this step and turn it over to questions. If you have anything you want to add.
Let me just add that, and Jerry's already talked about it a little bit, that prayer and meditation is a deeply individual, personal thing. And as the program of Alcoholics Anonymous encourages us to acquire a relationship with a God of our own understanding and a higher power that we choose, prayer and meditation is the same. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. The only thing that I wanted to share with you is our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane. I learned a long time ago that my mind has a mind of its own. And God has given me the ability to direct it a little bit. And as I said, our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane. So when I awake in the morning and I absolutely have to have my cup of coffee and sit and reflect upon the day ahead and consider the day ahead and consider the chores that I face and consider the obstacles and ask God for His guidance and direction. I absolutely have to get quiet, sit with that cup of coffee and wake up and be thankful, deeply thankful for the position that He's put me in, for everything that He's given me, for the lives that I've been allowed to touch and to be a part of. And I don't have a very complicated prayer life. In the course of the day, I just ask God for a little bit of guidance, a little bit of help. When I face indecision and face a difficult time, I ask for the strength to just sit and wait till an intuitive thought might come. You know, when I shared the infamous big book story about the gorilla, one of the most difficult things I had to do in my recovery is make a decision not to make a decision. That I had to come to understand with God's guidance that I don't need to have the answer all the time. I don't need to have the answer all the time. That God provided me a nice little bench to sit down on wait until I know whether to take a left or a right. These things become a working part of the mind. And the journey that we're on is so individual, and everybody's experience is so awesome that I think I'll end with that thought. We're gonna take a break, and I think I'm gonna take a quick break unless somebody has a burning desire to ask a question, and then we're going to conclude with an hour in step 12 with Jerry, and we're going to try to wrap up at 12 o'clock roughly, 12:15, 12:30, and then spend some social time and head down the highway. Anybody have something that they want to share real quickly? I guess that was a resounding yes.
You always go to the concert to pick the favorites, and there was a rumor that you and Gail met in a bar. I heard the story yesterday, and somebody said that is so cool they wanted to hear the story. So whether it's now or some other time, but after the break, what have you, but play some Skinner, man.
Well, I tell you, that is a story that, because our lives are transparent, you should hear that story. We did meet in a bar. Now, she will lie about that. She is dramatically honest in all other aspects of her life. She just doesn't want to acknowledge she met me in a bar. But here in front of everybody, sweetheart, did you not meet me in a bar? Okay, so there you have it. Now, let me tell you. I got to tell you this part of the story because it's, first of all, it's fun, but more importantly, I think it's constructive. Constructive and instructive, yes. By the time I met Gail, I had been through this process the very first time, and I had come to a conclusion that I have a lot of fun with the way I say it, but it happens to carry with it a great deal of truth for me. What I had discovered was that with respect to women, my picker's broken. Yeah. Got to play with that a little bit, Kelly. My picker was broken. I cannot ascertain which lady might be good for me and which lady would just be a train wreck for me. I will always pick the one that is going to take me down a road of total destruction. That's what I do. So I had come to the conclusion, and I called Don one day. I'd been single for a couple of years, and I called Don one day, and I said, Don, I think I've come to understand what my journey is going to be all about. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, I think I'm just going to be single, unattached the rest of my life, and I'll just work with old drunks in AA. He started laughing. I said, what are you laughing at? And he says, Jerry, you don't have a clue what God has in store for you. And so I thought about that, and then I hung up and went on down the road. And about 6-7 months later, somebody asked me to do a charity drive, March of Dimes charity drive. And I said, okay, and the drive was doing so well, and they wanted to raise the awareness of it in Wichita, Kansas, and they said they were going to have a program on the radio. They were going to advertise this drive on the radio. What it was is they had about 25 guys, and they were going to auction them off and have a bid for bachelors. And so they had 4 or 5 of the bachelors that were going to be auctioned off come to this bar where they were running a radio program live. And so we told what our package of entertainment was going to be, and I had tickets to a symphony or something like that. And so we were doing that, and I got up and I did my little spiel for the March of Dimes. And we did this about 7 o'clock, and I really wanted to get out of there. By this time of my sobriety, I wasn't afraid of bars, wasn't afraid of drinking, but I just didn't like to hang around them anymore. They were noisy and loud and smoky, so I got through, and I wanted to go home. The lady who was running it, she said, "Hey, this really went over very well. Would you come back at 10 and do another program live, 10 at night?" And so I very reluctantly said yes. See, this is... when somebody asks you to do something, if you have no real good reason to say no, you should say yes, because a little puff of wind is blowing you in a direction that may turn out to have marvelous results. I said yes, reluctantly. Came back at 10 o'clock. We did the deal. We got all through about 10:30, maybe 10:45, and I was standing there just trying to figure out a way to get home. And a very beautiful lady came up to me, and she says, "My name is Gail, and I work down here during the week, and would you ever want to go out to dinner sometime?" I took one look at her, and she was hot. No other way I can say it. I mean, she was. And I thought, well, that would work. And so she said, "Well, can we go talk for a little bit?" And so I said, yeah. We went over and sat down in that restaurant, and it was closed, really. Some people were very kind and brought her tea, brought me some coffee, and we talked for nearly 2 hours and just absolutely spent 2 hours in telling one another who we were, and we laughed a great deal, just a great deal. That was 1990, sweetheart. October of 1990, October the 24th, 1990. So that's 21 and a half years ago. And I've been laughing with this lady ever since. And that's what we do. And if my picker's broken, my thinker is broken. And so quite often I will say something to her, and she'll say, "Well, let's talk about that." And that means, just like Don, that means, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about it, and we'll do something different. And it really works. It works very well. And now, don't get me wrong. I sometimes go through that whole process like a spoiled child, stomping and kicking, but at the end, if I have any sanity at all, I will listen to what you. If you get a chance to hook up with somebody who's sane, go for it. Go for it. Anybody have anything else? Thank you. I appreciate that opportunity. Relationships. We are made to have a relationship. You know why? It's not because of what we can get. It's because of what we can give. We need to have someone in our life that we give ourselves completely and totally to, with no thought of getting anything in return. And Gail and I have been together for, like I say, 21 and a half years now. And I give myself completely and totally to her with no thought of getting anything in return, and she does the same with me. And it is a magnificent way to live. Magnificent. So, and you can always talk to her, because I will lie to you. She will tell you the truth. Is that it?
Why don't we reconvene here in like 5 or 10 minutes and have our last session and wrap up. Thanks, everybody. Down and get focused, and he walks away.
Well, Michelle gave me some instructions, and I had to follow.
She's not an Al-Anon.
Malcom said she was not an Al-Anon. Malcom said she was not an Al-Anon. My response to that is, maybe not, but she's a woman.
Some help up there, bud.
It's just like getting on a horse, Joe.
Jesus, I look like I'm old or something.
Right there with you. Just a little to the last of it.
This is an awesome time of the weekend. It's also a tough time. A tough time to kind of watch things break up and people leave, and it gets a little bit emotional. And in an hour or two, I'll be sitting here, and there'll be 6 or 8 or 10 of us that are staying, 15 of us that are staying tonight, and it'll be over, and it'll probably bring me to tears. But with that note, let me give the microphone to Dick, and we'll talk about step 12 some. Dick and Jerry will.
Thanks, Malcolm. Maybe we can just take a minute here. I could talk about step 12 all afternoon. So emotional right now, I don't know. I'm so grateful to the program of AA and to all of you for taking a guy that people couldn't stand to be around and giving me the best life that I've ever known. I'll always be grateful for that. I was lucky enough to have this guy sitting to my right, and when we finished all the other steps, it was in about August of 1994. He didn't let us sit around long. He told us we had to go out and give what was so freely given to us, and I came back. We could still come back. It's funny, this little Monday night group that I have, that's kind of what's happened there too. We've got some guys that have been through, and that's the deal I made with them, that they could come back, but that they had to bring some other people, and that natural flow has kind of happened at the meeting. It's been the most wonderful thing, probably since I was with Jerry. But anyways, I just think back to all the little subtleties that I was given in that summer and spring of 1994. Some of it's kind of funny. I was talking to Gail about it, and we get these phone calls, and the phone calls would say, they were from Jerry, and he'd say, show up at 5 o'clock at the office. He was a little nicer than that, actually, but he'd say, why don't you stop by and pick me up at 5 o'clock? And I was in my ultimate selfishness then, and I think, what's this guy want now? What does he want now? So I'd say, well, what are we doing? And he'd go, just show up. And I would, and Gene would be there, and Dana, Benny. And I'd say, what are we going to do? And he says, well, we're going to move somebody. I said, move somebody? Who? He said, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to move somebody. It was actually a lady that worked at the FDIC. And so we did. And I remember on this particular Friday night thinking, I had a Harley, and I was fairly new at the Harley game, and I'm thinking to myself, I'd rather be riding the Harley than doing this goddamn shit. But I did it anyways. Another time he took him and I, we went down to Duxbury. Do you remember this? He's going to help out a guy, I guess at the FDIC, to be of service. And we were going to clean up his backyard. And we started looking at this thing, and it was full of thorns and poison ivy and everything else. And we both decided that probably wasn't a good service project. Another time we moved a grand piano in the back of a pickup truck. But one of the things that he was doing, and I didn't even know it at the time, was he was beginning to set the stage for us for service work. I was too self-centered to even see that at the time, but it became very apparent as I look back that's what he was trying to do, and he did it very subtly. I'm not as good as he was at that. I'm a little more direct, maybe, but he set the stage. And when we were done, like I said earlier, he didn't let us hang around very long. He said, "You've got to go out and give this away." And Gene and I, on September 24th, I can remember the date, I got re-employed. So I was unemployed from February of '94 until all through this thing. So it was really an ideal time to A, look for a job, and B, to really be in recovery, and be in a lot of pain, by the way. I was in pain through the whole thing. And Jerry was writing his final paper for his undergraduate degree at age, 51 or 52? 54. On recidivism in the correctional facility, which was fascinating to me. If you want to hear an interesting thing, talk to him about that sometime. Anyways, I got a job on September 24th, 1994, and we had been going to Bridgewater, as I told you yesterday, and so I tried to get out of my new job and drive down to Bridgewater. And if you've ever driven the traffic going down to the South Shore in the Brockton area, it was horrific. And I got there and I said, "Well, I wonder where everybody is." Well, they had already gone in. And once you go in, that's it. They lock it up. So next week I tried again, and I didn't make it again. And that I know today that was just God telling me that it was time for the separation. We had had about a year and a half of really good time, Gene and I, with Jerry, on the trip down, in snowstorms and in good weather, and eating the hamburger at the Friendlies or wherever, at the traffic circle there in Bridgewater, the meeting on the way down, dinner, the meeting in the meeting, and the meeting on the way back. But it was time to separate from that, and that's what God was telling me. So I told you a little bit about it yesterday. We had this gig that we went, commitment that we went in to along with the treatment correctional facility, and I told you the story. So that was our first, Gene and I, our first attempt. See, we got the same thing. We got the meeting before the meeting, we got the meeting, and then we got the meeting on the way home. So he worked at the Bellingham Power Plant. He'd get on the train at Forge Park, come into South Station. I'd get out of work, pick him up, drive across the city. We'd go to the VA or to Longwood, do the deal, and then we had the meeting on. I'd drive him back to Forge Park and then go home. And that lasted about 5 years. And we had a fantastic experience with those folks at Longwood. That was the beginning of my service work. And other things started happening. There's a fellow named Peter Walsh, and Peter was a therapist at this place called Modern Assistance. Modern Assistance was a contracted counseling firm that contracted out to the unions. And so Peter was about 10 years sober at the time, going absolutely insane like a lot of us, and he was a therapist. And so guys were coming to him, and he was trying to help them the best way they could, because that's what his training was. And Peter and I started working together, and Peter started to see results in his life. And he got so jazzed up that his patients would come to him and he'd say, "Look, we can talk for this hour, but, I've got the real answer. Why don't you come out on Saturday mornings to Dick Hall's kitchen and we'll have a meeting and we'll see what it was like." So I had a little meeting going on in my kitchen on Saturday mornings, and I lived in a nice residential quiet neighborhood, and all these cars would pull up and these people would start bailing out of the cars, and I don't know what my neighbors thought. It was pretty hilarious. And that went on for a long time, and we had a blast doing it. In 1998 we were fortunate enough to be able to buy a boat, and we started going away on the weekends during the summer. And they were still having that meeting, so I just left the keys to the house, and they would come in and have the meeting, make the coffee, and my son John would be upstairs, probably sleeping off a hangover. He knew everybody. He'd come down as we do after the fact, and he'd probably making a cup of coffee or whatever, and they'd be just wrapping up the meeting or whatnot. So my kids grew up in an atmosphere of AA and in an atmosphere of recovery, and they probably loved that and hated it sometimes, but nevertheless, they got to know the whole cast of characters. And we just had wonderful times together. And if I could bring you any message this afternoon about 12-step work, it all emanates from those relationships. And I love to talk about this today because it's become completely clear to me that the most important thing in the program of recovery, in the walk that we do, is the fellowship that occurs when we put a couple drunks together. Not at a meeting. When we put them together, when one drunk's up on the ladder trying to hang a gutter, and there's two drunks down there laughing their ass off at him, and he's trying to put the gutter up, and he's got a huge resentment and getting all pissed off and yelling and screaming at the guys on the ground. That's the real deal. Don't miss it. We've had so much fun, and Jerry and I and Dana and everybody, we always reminisce about the good old days, and that's what we have in this whole thing. We have those relationships that are bonds for life. That's what's happening here. If you're coming here for the first time, and I'm looking at you guys that are here for the first time, what happens? You're going to come back, and you're going to see the people that you saw before. And that's what this is all about. It's about some people being together and sharing experience. So that 12-step work, continued. And I was talking to Ron out there. The first woman I ever worked with was actually my first person that I ever took through the work was a woman, I should say, an Al-Anon at that. And all the rules out there told me that I couldn't do that, and I didn't know whether I could or I couldn't. But so I had to call my sponsor and ask him, and he asked me what my intention was, and I said it was to try to help her. She was an Al-Anon that was in the meeting with Deb, and so we started to have an experience together. If God's involved, anything's possible. We don't need a lot of rules. We really don't. So God has given me over the last 18 or 19 years just a wonderful, wonderful life that's been filled with you guys and filled with that idea of giving back what's been so freely given to me. And I alluded to it the other day, and I'll only editorialize for 60 seconds, but I see in AA a lot of people that just aren't quite on the beam. They just don't quite seem to get this. And I know what the issue is. The issue is, if they've been through the whole deal and they're not out there giving it away, then what's going to happen is slowly but surely we're going to go back to self. I got mine, I'm okay, and now I'm going to go to meetings and I'm going to live life. And pretty soon the old stuff starts to creep back in, and we're not where we need to be. So the answer is always in 12-step service. If you've been through this and you're not doing that, that's where the answer is. And I think we all think that we can't do this. Oh, I can't do this. I'm not spiritual enough. That's what I thought. I looked at this guy next to me as a spiritual giant, and he looked at his sponsor as a spiritual giant. And, the reality of it was he was a year and a half out from having done the work, and he looked like the Grand Poobah to me, He really did. I couldn't envision the stories that he told would have seemed to have been 20 years ago. But they weren't. They were, they were right there. And he brought this thing to life. And that's what I believe that's what we do, and that's what we have to do. And all we need is God and our experience. And that will pull this whole thing together for us and give us a life that we never could dream of. The other thing, real quickly, and I'll let Jerry talk for a little bit, is how do we take this in all our affairs? And I talked a little bit about it yesterday morning. My friend Chuck C, AA at work, AA at play, and AA and family. How do we take the principles of the program? It's really just extending what we do here. It's harder to work on the outside of here than it is on the inside, but it's certainly possible. If we keep that 12-step idea in the back of our minds, how can I be of service? And that's the constant reminder that we really should work with. How can I be of service when I go out there? How can I be of service in the furniture liquidation business to try to help my clients get what they want? And that's all that I need to worry about. I don't need to worry about whether I make a profit or not or whatnot. And one of my sponsees, we did a little interesting exercise. He's a commissioned sales guy, and I said, what if you could just put the reports down, the sales reports that you get every month, and just be of service? What would happen? He came to me at the end. He said, this is the first month I did that. I said, how'd it work out? Great. He said, I didn't look once. I was tempted, but he said, I didn't look once. And he said, I had a great month. And I said, you'll probably keep having a great month, if God's there with you. I never have to worry about what I'm trying to sell or what number I'm trying to make. If I'm really trusting in God, just go out there every day and do it. Keep it in front of you. Do the next right thing, and the rest takes care of itself. So that's, our family. Our family is always a challenging place. Can I stay out of their way? My kids probably are smiling, or one of them is right now. Can I stay out of their way? Hard sometimes being a parent. That's what I have to pray for. AA at home, AA at work, AA at AA. How can I be of service?
Thank you. No sorry at all. That's great. I really do. I love these guys so deeply. And I mentioned when I had a chance to talk earlier, not today, but I wasn't feeling that good yet, but I love to listen to these guys. I really do. And you'd think as many times as we've heard one another and been together, you'd think, okay, surely what do they have to say to one another that hasn't been said and heard before? I don't know, but there's something. It's kind of like reading the big book. You read the big book and you think, well, I don't need to read that anymore, but the next time you pick it up and go through it, you see things you'd never seen before, don't you? What's the same way with us? Is we see things about people and they tell us things about themselves that we didn't see before because they didn't tell us before. It really is a marvelous deal. But that leads me up to what I want to talk to you about very briefly, and leave you guys with a concept. What is this really all about? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, that tells us what's happened. We've had a spiritual awakening. My life isn't mine anymore. My life belongs to other people. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried, big word, we tried to carry this message. Doesn't say we successfully carried this. Doesn't say we carried it only when we felt good. But having had a spiritual awakening, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. All our affairs may start out like Dickie was talking about with my family this morning. But the real key thing that has really kind of come into me this last year, maybe the last 6 months, is how do I carry this message? Well, I'm going to tell you a story. That's what I'm going to do. All good spiritual people have a story to tell. Now, I guarantee you, your story is as fascinating as anyone's. I don't know, this has been 10, 11, 12 years ago. I was going to go do something. I flew into a little airport over here in New Hampshire, And the young man who picked me up was like 18 years old. His name was Charlie. And I got in the car with Charlie, and he was going to drive me back to where we were going to do this Big Book Weekend. And he said, Jerry says, tell me your story. I said, well, hell, Charlie, you're going to hear my story this weekend. Why don't you tell me yours? He said, oh, I don't have much of a story. I said, well, we've got an hour and a half in the car. Why don't you tell me the best you can? He commenced to tell me the most fascinating story of a young man. 18 years old, and I mean he had been in and out of jails, in and out of holding facilities for young boys, and it was just, I mean, it was full of tragedy, it was full of hope, but here at the tail end of the story was he was alive and well, and more important, he was sober, and he was on our path. And it was the most wonderful time I think I've ever had. And I tell you that because Dick mentioned it. We think, well, we can't do this. We can't do this like those folks. I mean, God Almighty, I really was introduced to AA in this, like I say, year 13, and when I knew guys like Don and Gary and Ernie and Bob W. and some giants. Now, we don't need giants anymore. But we had them back then, and so that's kind of what I was introduced to this with. And so I'm thinking, hell, I can't do this. But what they showed me was all we do is just tell stories. That's all it's about. And it happens that my story is about Jerry. Not because Jerry's special, but it's the only one I know of any real consequence. And about 98% of that's a lie, so I'm just doing... But next year, it'll only be 97%. And maybe if I do this enough, we'll get down to find out who Jerry really is. But I'll do this the best I can. And I used to say this about taking somebody else through the book. I'm about a grade C or D. Probably a grade C is too high. I'm probably about a D grade actor. But I've been given an Academy Award-winning script. Think about that. Got an Academy Award-winning script. I don't have much to bring to it. I'm going to deliver it the best I can. And let's see what happens. And you all have that. You all have that. Every one of you. And so, Dick has kind of alluded to it, and Malcolm's alluded to it. When you have the experience that is offered to us through the 12 steps, you have this awakening, and you must go out and carry this message to others. You really don't. I came out here. Dick talks about coming out here, and I only had about a year and a half of since I had been through this process myself. And I was looking for anybody that would sit still long enough for me to evangelize. God dang, folks, would you listen? I've got something to really tell you here. And there the key word is tell, and I wasn't sharing yet, I was just telling. We all have to do that. So when you're in your evangelical stage and nobody wants to listen, don't worry about it. Just keep it up, and eventually those folks out there will wear those sharp edges of evangelism off, and eventually you become a storyteller. And when you do, they'll start showing up. They talk about starting this in 93, and Dickie just mentioned it. 93 is when we started. It didn't get over till 94. I want to clarify something about that. It's not necessary for it to take that long. I didn't have anybody else that was willing to listen to me, and my sobriety depended on having somebody I could share this with. So I strung this out as long as I could. I think we did every line, didn't we? We did every line. We started at the very beginning, and through the doctor's opinion, all the way through the last page. And I mean, every period, every paragraph, not missing a thing. I had to do that as long as I could. By the time we got through with this, I had seen other people starting to hear about this and showing up. So we, in fact, the first time we did this, I think there were 8 of us, maybe 9. We got all through and decided that, well, they said, can we do this again? And I said, well, not with ourselves. We are not just going to sit here ourselves in a little closed group and do this again. I said, we might be able to do it again if you go bring somebody to come in. And the next thing we knew, we had some very beautiful Al-Anons joined us. Gail joined us. We had some other people come. And so the group was a little larger. And it finally got to the point where we had people stacked up on the stairway going up to our second story. And we did that for a while, and we fed them as long as we could. One thing that always works when you're dealing with an alcoholic is feed them. Feed them. The old Salvation Army learned that years ago. Feed them, and then you can preach to them. Hey, listen, whatever it takes. You can even stretch a story if you want to a little bit to make a point. I used to listen to my sponsor. And once in a while he'd talk to me. He said, you know old so-and-so? And I said, yeah. He'd say, boy, I love listening to him. I say, why? I says, because when he's up there on the podium and I'm listening to him, I know he's lying. And but he said, that's all right, because I lie too. We don't do that intentionally. We really, truly don't. Sometimes to make it a point, these old-timers had to make it appear a little bit more of a colorful story than it really was. But listen, I think those days are past us, and we can say it the way it is. What Dickie and I and Malcom have done our best to do is to share with you a little simple deal. A guy had been given this from another guy, and we sat down in the kitchen of a house that my wife was very gracious about letting us have, and she'd let us cook. But let me tell you something about this deal. We would cook every Monday night in that kitchen, or somebody would bring something and we would eat it there. And whatever, the mess that a bunch of guys will make was always cleaned up, and it was immaculate when we got through. That's what these little group of guys, and I didn't ask them to do that. They just did it. See, there's something that's awakened. The spirit in each of us is awakened once we commence this process. So they'd come in, we sat down and we'd do that whole thing, make the kitchen a mess. When they got all through, you would never know they were there. Years later, let me give you another example of how this deal works. We had a wedding at our house. We had a little place down in Cumberland, Rhode Island. We had about 4 acres and a lot of apple trees, and it was kind of a pretty little place. And so people would like to come there and get married. And we had one particular wedding ceremony where they had a tent and they had chairs, and it really was a nice affair. And when it was in the height of that ceremony and then the reception afterward, it was just a mass of people having a good time, chairs and food and what have you. And when it was all over, all of a sudden, in about 30 minutes, everything disappeared. And it was as though no one had ever been there. There wasn't any trash. The tent was down. The chairs were gone. It was quiet again. And we had some folks there who didn't know anything about AA, and they didn't know us. But they had to come up and they said, how did you organize this like this? How do you do this and organize it that well? I said, you asked the wrong guy, because I don't know. He said, what do you mean you don't know? I said, I don't know. It just happens. Now, that's not to say an event like this doesn't take some planning, because it does. And I know those events that we did years ago took some planning. But I'll tell you, there's nothing like the spirit of a bunch of folks who are getting well in the way they learn to start being helpful. And believe it or not, in that 12th step, being helpful, if it's just picking up chairs, picking up trash, that's being of service. That's trying to carry this message and practice these principles in all our affairs. My sponsor said to me one time, I said, Don, I don't think I can be of service right now. I said, I'm too broken. He said, when you get out of your car in the parking garage, can you pick up a piece of paper or a cigarette butt? I said, well, I might be able to do that. He said, now, can you do that and not tell anyone? I'm not sure. But I did. And some funny things began to happen as a result of that little tiny deal. Now, to show you that I'm not perfect at that yet, I love to tell a story. Our trash is picked up at home every other week, 26 times a year. 24 to 25 times a year, my wife takes it out there. I guarantee you, I will take it out once in a while. And when I get back into the house, I immediately say, honey, I got the trash. I know I will have attained spiritual gianthood when I can come in and not say anything. But I'm not there yet. If you want to know, did this work for me? Did this work for me? We're famous for getting to the end of the steps and say, I don't think this works. I don't think this works. It didn't work with me. And then yet you'll find yourself having to find somebody else that you can share a piece of this with. Just a little tiny piece of this. How did it work for you? I don't know. I sat down with these guys one time, went through these steps, and all of a sudden my life began to change. I don't know how it works. It just works. Well, when I'm trying to carry that message, I am practicing step 12. You know, years ago, when I first brand new in AA, I heard this message. You got to carry it on, and I would pass it on. And so I would I went to meetings for about 3 months, and next thing I knew, I was staying sober, and I wasn't sure how. People said, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to AA. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, there's a meeting every Monday night at 7 o'clock down at the corner of 18th and Elm in Independence, Kansas, and that's where I go on Monday nights. And I don't know, it's just working. And one thing led to another. And, you know, that little old group had Father, what was his name? Father Martin. Father Martin. Any of you ever heard Father Martin or heard some of his tapes? They're fabulous tapes if you haven't ever heard from him. We were at this little meeting one Monday night, and a bunch of guys said, listen, Father Martin's coming to town. You want to go hear him? I'm not even a year sober, and I go listen to this guy, and I'm so on fire about sobriety. Anything's better than drinking. And I look back on all of those times that I had people come to me. And we've talked about our selfishness and self-centeredness in the extreme. I was 6-7 months sober, and all that selfishness and self-centeredness was still there. And here's what still amazes me to this day, is I had people in AA that had 20, 25 years sobriety. You could see them just kind of glow. People have been doing this for a while. They do, don't they? They do have a certain light about them. And they'd come and say to me, God, Jerry, we love it so much when you're here. I look back and I think those people were spiritual giants because they kept asking me to come back. And I'm sure I didn't give anything to those meetings, but I took away from them. So for 13 years, I took from AA without giving back. That's just what I did. That was the way I was made. I'm kind of the original black hole. If it comes by me, it gets sucked in and nobody ever hears from it again. That's the way my thinking goes. I have a good thought, it falls into a dark black hole, and you never hear from it again. All kidding aside, 12, 13 years sober, I'm introduced to this deal. And in a very short period of time, I'm carried through the steps. I was only with Don that first time maybe 2.5 to 3 months, and then circumstances required that I leave Denver, and that was the most difficult time I'd ever had, because I finally had found someone in AA that I dearly loved and respected, and I wanted to spend every moment with them, and circumstances pulled me right out of there. And I thought, God, I don't understand why this is happening like it is. And so that's what happened. And so when I left there, all I knew was that there was a piece of me inside of me that could remember him saying, well, go out and be of service, Jerry. Whatever you do, just be of service. And I remember him repeating that little mantra over and over, not in a dictatorial fashion, but in a very loving and almost fatherly or a friendship type way. Just go out and have fun and be of service. Whatever else you do, be of service. And you know, if I can spend a few minutes with another old drunk, and maybe they get the idea that if I go to this meeting and I do what these folks do, maybe I can get sober and I won't ever have to drink again. And if you're an alcoholic who just can't stop drinking, or if you know somebody who can't stop drinking, they just can't. What we're sharing with you today is a promise to them that we can show a way that it'll be possible they never have to drink again. That's what this whole weekend is about. It's about being able to carry a message to somebody that says to them in such a loving and kind way, listen, you never have to drink again. You're not going to have, everything's not going to be smooth and happy, and I'm not going to be on a spiritual cloud and just have a grand time every moment. You know, if you'd have seen me Friday nights, you wouldn't have thought I was very spiritual. I was as miserable. I wanted to die. But that's a part of the package. I'm in my human condition, but I don't have to drink. You know, AA really still carries that most priceless of all messages to the alcoholic. You don't ever have to drink again. And most of us have been in a spot where we absolutely had to drink. We had to. Every drink I took, from the first one to the last one, was absolutely necessary. And when I took the last drink, I was so totally broken that I was ready to be locked up and put away for the rest of my life. Because I knew that I couldn't handle that thing out there called life. I just couldn't do it. Anybody remember when it was like that? You can't do whatever it is out here. And I understand today that my mind was so broken, and that my perception of the world was so distorted. It talks about that in our big book, doesn't it? It talks about our minds are twisted. We don't see things right. And we come in here and we try to do this. And listen, I'm a guy who will absolutely fail at anything. I don't care how good it is, I will fail at it. And if you think you're one that'll fail, well, just join the crowd, because I'm failing every day. I fall far short every day of what I want to be. But I know this, that if I hang around with you, I become better. Gail and I hate to be apart. We just absolutely hate to be apart. It's absolutely painful for me to be apart from her. But she knows when I go out on a weekend to do one of these, that I will come back and I'll be better than I was when I left. Because by hanging around with you, I become better than I really am. And I think when one drunk, Dickie was talking, or it was Malcom or Dickie talking about that, when one drunk sits down with another to talk about sobriety, I'll guarantee you they'll both be better. They'll both be better. And listen, if you think that you're trying to carry this message and no one's listening, and no one's being helped, if you're trying to carry this message, there's at least one drunk who's being helped. At the very minimum. I may do a lousy job of carrying this message, but there's one drunk who will always be helped. Now, we don't do it for that reason. It just happens. You know, you can't give away everything that you've got inside of you, because what you do when you empty out, something's got to be filled back up. So when I give you all of the Spirit that I have to give you this time around, there'll be more of the Spirit that will flow back in, and it'll be better than what I let flow out. If I don't do anything other than share with you that, give everything that you have to give, and what you get back in return will be better than what you gave. I will leave here and I'll be tired, and it has nothing to do with being sick on Friday night. I've never done a weekend like this, that what I didn't leave, that I've just absolutely zeroed out. And that's because when I come here, I feel like I have an obligation. Nothing noble about this, please. Nothing noble at all. But I feel like I have an obligation in every sense of my being. I've got to give you all that I have to give. Because you're giving me all that you have to give right now. You're giving me your undivided attention. And I tell you what, every time I'm allowed to do this, you all are helping my sobriety by immeasurable amounts. You have no idea how much you help me. And I think I'm trying to give something to you, and what flows back to me is far and away better than what I gave to you. I've done these for a long time, and I've tried at the end of each one of them to say thank you. I don't know that I will ever achieve the level of thanks that I'm trying to convey. But I do thank you. You're terrific.
Thank you from Dick and I. Thank you all for being here, for helping us with this journey, and being a part of this. I'm going to turn the microphone over to young Deb, and she's got a couple of things that she would like to do for all of us. We're going to close with a little fun surprise this year, and let me give this to Deb.
Hi, I'm Debbie, Grateful Al-Anon. Thanks, everybody. Hey, Gail, I need you.
Be gentle with that idea now, because I need it.
This is a little thank you for you. And this one's for Jer. Sure, it's yours, honey. You can have it.
I didn't earn mine this weekend. I laid up there in bed all weekend.
And that's for you, Dick. And that one's for Malcolm. Thanks, everybody. One of the guys got yours and Malcolm's.
I think this is a shirt or sweatshirt that says the world's greatest BS.
I don't think Woolward says that.
I really am sorry. It's a beautiful, beautiful shirt.
I looked at it.
I only wore it once. Dana helped pick this shop? Dana kept me sober for nearly 3 years, single-handedly. He would drive down to Bridgewater, 3 or 4 or 5 years. He'd drive down to Bridgewater, and he had one headlight that was out. And I would say something to him. I said, well, why don't you at least use the others? If you dim or bright, I don't know which one it was. He said, go the other way. At least we'll have 2 headlights. And he said, no, if I do the other, they're both out. All during that time, I was afraid I was going to get killed in the car crash, and so I always wanted to be ready to go to heaven. I did my best. No, we can't make that up.
It's come to my attention that Jane can sing Amazing Grace for us, so I've asked her to do so, and after which we can circle up and say the Lord's Prayer and close.
Thank you. If you'd all like to stand, please, and hold hands. And please join in if you know the words. I'll hold elbow.
Hold you.
Okay. It doesn't have to be a circle. It can be whatever you're comfortable with.
Snake dance.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we'd first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Whose Father?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those